I believe the biggest blame rests with applicant tracking system technology. Any company that employs 1,000 or say 5,000 or more people, the technology was chosen by usually HR and not recruitment. And let's make a distinction, because if talent acquisition chose it, it would not have been built the way most of these big systems are built. So you go to apply for, say, an hourly job with a major warehousing organization. And this is an hourly job, low skill, no skill. You have to fill in 6 screens. You can't do it on your phone. You have to fill in 6 screens of information. And then at the end, it tells you to upload your resume, and you have to spend anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes just to apply for the job. Along comes something called Amazon. We're going to make your whole buying experience frictionless. I can see something on Amazon and have it shipped to me tomorrow. I don't care what goes on behind the scenes, but I'm now conditioned to expect response, speed. I get what I want, and everything is easy. What an absolute day and night contrast with how to apply for a job. We know the technology exists because we interact with it every single day. So why do companies make you fill in 7 screens and then upload your resume and it's all wrong? Like, it's so outdated and old-fashioned.
I do want to counter your point because you were explaining the Amazon effect, and I actually blame the Amazon effect as one of the big challenges that we are coming across. So yes, you're 100% right. The ATS process, especially with the big players, right? Their application process is a nightmare. There was a gentleman that was applying for, I think, 150 jobs, and he was just giving a ranking on like what was the experience as a job seeker. And the one thing that he called out is he had to create 80 different profiles to apply for jobs on a Workday system. So 80 different Workday profiles. I'm like, what world do we live in, right? Like, why wouldn't that profile just carry over to anyone in Workday? But to your point, so Indeed came in and was like, well, we got to fix this, right? Because the applicant tracking systems are just not doing a good job. And they leverage exactly the example of Amazon, removing all friction from the application process with a one-click hire, right? That is where the majority of Indeed applications are coming from. So that's been good. Like, credit to Indeed that they saw a problem and like, we're going to fix it. But I think in doing this, they created that it's so easy to apply for now that literally a person can go in and apply to 200 jobs within hours with the one-click apply and really not even know where they applied to or have any clue of the company. And then we're seeing AI tools come in play that are leveraging this to be able to apply to 1,200, 1,500 jobs in a day. Of course, they're not going to be qualified for these jobs. Like, they're just applying for any role. Career coaches have been telling people, no, apply for all the jobs, right? Like, apply, even if you're not qualified, apply for the job. And that has just created a massive amount of noise. I am putting the blame on the employers because the employers have done nothing to figure this out. It's your fault. I'm blaming you on ghosting.
Hi, I'm Denise Chaffin, and this is our podcast, Talking TA. And today I have with me Serge Boudreau and Shelley Billinghurst from the Recruitment Flex up in Calgary, Canada, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I got that right. Yay. Anyway, and we are going to have a nice discussion today, kind of centered around ghosting. So, Serge, I'll let you start. Introduce yourself, please. Tell us a little bit about the Recruitment Flex and what you guys do up in Calgary.
I guess beauty before age. So I'll go first. I'm Serge Boudreau, as you said. I am the producer and co-host of the Recruitment Flex, and we've been now over 340 episodes going on for 4 years, talking about the recruitment industry, best practice. And it's really focused for practitioners that are looking for advice on a day-to-day basis, but also to catch up with what's going on with the world of work.
I've heard some of your episodes. They're fabulous. And
Thank
Shelley,
you.
introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Denise, first of all, thank you so much for having us on your show. This is so much fun. And like Serge said, 300 episodes, 300 plus episodes, and we still haven't run out of things to talk about. So I'm Shelley Billinghurst. I am co-host of the Recruitment Flex podcast. I've spent the last, and I think what we've agreed on is I can just say more than 20 years working in talent acquisition, both in agency as well as heading up corporate talent acquisition teams. And we really love to connect with anyone who's in talent acquisition, leading a team. And I always, my thing on our show is the tip of the week. And it was actually Serge's idea, so I'll give him credit. But the tip of the week is something that if you're working in recruitment, you can take back to your desk this afternoon and use it. So that's my little coming up with one every week. I don't know. We've been doing that for how long, Serge? The tip of the week?
Oh, probably a year now. I originally had a name for it, Shelley, but we had to change it. The original name was Just a Tip, but I guess that wasn't appropriate for the audience, so we had to change it.
We actually arm wrestled over that, and I won. So
Tip of the week.
Yes, tip of the week is what we called it.
On top of all the other, we do recruitment insights, we do what's in the news as well. And then we have our Tuesday episodes, which is interviewing either practitioners or people in HR tech, CEOs, higher level people, thought leaders, influencers. So it's really focused on that. So Shelley says she has 20 years. I think you have more than 20 years. I think it's really close to 30, Shelley, because I'm getting to 20 years.
Oh, yeah, true. It is. So 1994, Denise. That's when I had got my first job in recruitment in 1994. And it's my life's...
Where was it?
I was in high school. I was just entering high school, actually, to be precise. Kindergarten.
Yeah, he was in kindergarten.
So, Shelley, what was your first job in recruiting?
I worked for a privately owned staffing firm. And on my third day, Denise, I knew I had found my life's work because it was 100% commission. And I think by my third week, I had already placed 2 people. And so, so the owners were kind of like, oh, okay, so she follows process well, which was really the secret to my success, was follow the process. Don't mess with the recipe. So I spent almost 11 years with that firm. Started up divisions. I looked after North America, Australia, and an office in the UK. I did executive search, retained search with them. I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Wow, that's amazing. Good for you. I started out in working for a staffing agency here in Phoenix. In fact, the guy that I was working for is still recruiting 40 some years later, and I started in 1988 working for him.
Wow.
So, yeah. But, we were working for companies at the time like IBM and Motorola and also Capgemini. And I remember we were looking for programmer analysts. But yeah, same thing. Well, we were 100% commission, and I started making money right away. And I'm like, okay, I can do this. But
it's funny. No one starts wanting to be in recruitment, but it only takes a couple of weeks and a little bit of money, and then suddenly we all fall in love with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we follow the money, kind of. I think at first, and then find our own path in this industry, whether it's going into corporate recruiting or our own agency, so there's that. But,
well, there's so many different paths, right? If you look at it, I ended up working on the corporate side, but I also worked on the HR tech side, working for Indeed and Workopolis and companies on that end. Shelley started a recruitment marketing agency, which is different than a staffing agency. So there's so many different avenues as in recruitment that you can take, right? There's sourcing, recruitment marketing. You can work on both sides, vendor, be a recruiter, lead talent acquisition teams. The options are limitless.
Because you're working with so many different business units and so many different organizations. So it's not like people have asked me before, what's your specialty? It's like, I'm agnostic. I don't really have a specialty. I just know how to ask the right questions, right? Don't you guys agree with that? I mean, have people asked you that before?
The term that comes to mind, Denise, is the accidental profession, because not many people went to school to get into recruitment or talent acquisition. But so in terms of it being like a launching off point, is something Serge and I have talked about and discussed with many different people over the years. And that is HR, those people who go into HR and use recruitment as the jumping off point versus really going deep and becoming a recruitment professional. And that's a lot of the genesis of why we started the podcast. We looked around in Canada, nobody was really doing anything to upskill talent acquisition, to really bring value to recruiters on their day-to-day. And we're talking about talent acquisition professionals who aren't just using this as a way to get into HR. Because I think the biggest mistake that organizations make is to take someone, your most junior person, and put them on recruitment. They don't even know what they don't know about the business. They think, or the belief is that this is an administrative function or that it is purely transactional. Out of the same breath, Denise, they say that people are our most valuable resource. But who are you assigning to bring these people into your organization? You're taking the lowest paid person in HR and making them do things like screen resumes and phone candidates and try and represent enthusiastically your organization, the opportunity. It needs to be its own profession and not a jumping off or a springboard into HR. I think it's a big mistake to do that. Serge?
Yeah, I agree with that. Because if you look at HR itself, it's completely different. The skill sets that are needed to be successful in HR and talent acquisition are different. It'd be like hiring an accountant to do sales when we hire HR people to do talent acquisition. It's not their drive. It's not what they're passionate about. It's not their personality type. And I'm generalizing here. I know there's exceptions to this. But to answer your question, your initial question, as far as like recruiting in different sectors or industries, and I'm the same way. I think a really good recruiter with some time, right? Like you have to know what the right questions and everything, but you also have to understand the world that your candidates are living in. So say you're going to go into tech recruitment, you should have an understanding. What are the programming languages? What's the sequence? How do they work? All of these are important, but that can be taught, that can be learned, that you can take the time. So I feel the same way as you, Denise. I think I could recruit in any industry and be comfortable. There will be a lag time for me to really understand it, but I think any good recruiter can do it.
Yeah, but we have those lag times with new companies. Even if we're working in, for example, in my company, we've had a strong focus in the semiconductor industry. And we have a lot of semiconductor clients. Every time we get a new one, there's something new that they do that the other clients don't do, right? So there's still that lag time just coming up to speed on their process, on their culture, on the company in general, their products and whatnot. So
this is where the intake is so critical. With a new company, new type of role, make sure you're really digging into those questions so you understand it. And I've led teams in talent acquisition in the tech industry, and one of the biggest, I guess, for a new recruiter, the biggest challenge they've had is not saying that they don't understand, right? They're just going along with it. And I think we're not asking enough questions in the fear of looking dumb to these software developers that have been doing this for a long time. Like, we got to ask those questions. We got to have an understanding. There's nothing wrong in looking stupid, because anytime you're doing something new, guess what? You're not going to be good at it. You just have to live with that fact and ask the questions and dig in deeper so you understand the world. And you'll never understand it like they do, but if you can get to a point that you can have the conversations and you actually add value to your job seekers that you're talking to, makes a difference, huge difference.
It does. It does. Oh, I know. I can remember working on Semiconductor years ago, and I was working on site, and I would go and sit in their design review meetings just so I could learn something,
Yeah.
Just from their meetings. But it was their marketing teams that taught me that business. It was the marketing teams. So after that, I started hitting up marketing people.
It's a good idea.
To learn to learn what their products were, because they were used to explaining things on layman's terms.
Yeah.
So it was
so true. That's a really good advice. Really, I never thought of that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, I was like, what? One of the things we wanted to talk about today, speaking of candidates and recruiting, is a current issue that has been a growing issue, I guess, over time. Ghosting has become a thing since the onset of social media. So as a result of social media, and it started with dating apps, I guess, Merriam-Webster actually added a new definition in their dictionary for ghosting. Here's one definition of ghosting: when you scare somebody. And another definition is the lack of communication or dropping communication with somebody. But it is an increasing problem, and we can talk about, I read a couple of ideas that are good solutions. We can talk about that as well to hopefully maybe see this ghosting issue come full circle. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think ghosting has been happening for a long time. I think it's just become more in the limelight since probably 2017. You probably nailed it there. But you think about it, we've been ghosting candidates for a long time, as well as recruiters talking in generality. Then we've gone through a cycle that is a little bit different, right? Like when we grew up, if we could get one interview, we were so excited. Like if we got an interview at McDonald's at 17, 18, man, we were there. We were there before. We dressed the best way possible, even if it was McDonald's. As the advent, how the world of recruitment marketing has changed dramatically, there is a lot more job openings out there. If you think of, just look at the Indeeds of the world, all the aggregators. It used to be like, okay, you bring your resume to the McDonald's or the Burger King or whatever fast food job, or at the mall. You go in the mall with your resume and stop at every location. No, you would never ghost because you were so happy to get that interview. But in a world now that you can apply to 500, 1,000 jobs, and suddenly you get a call back and you get several callbacks, but you're going to start ghosting people because you're like, hey, I have other opportunities. They're ghosting me. So who cares, right? Like it just seems so transactional in this day and age that there's no guilt. And obviously the generations and how they feel about work has completely changed in the last 15 to 20 years. But I would say even since the pandemic, completely different. And we are going into a world where, even though right now it's some people are struggling to find jobs, but this will be an employee labor market for the foreseeable future. In most countries, I know in Canada it will, in the US it will as well. Just the population growth is just not big enough for how many jobs are coming in play. A lot of people are retiring. So they're going to have the upper hand. We just have to figure out a way how to get them to show up to the interview, then get them to show up to work the first days. And like you said, there's many ways of doing it. Some don't, some work, some don't. Shelley, what's your take here?
So you touched on the connection to the labor market. When we look back over just from 2020 to present, and we saw, and those of us, Denise, you and I certainly have seen a number of business cycles, but nothing so radical as what happened in 2020. But what we have seen is that the ebb and flow of high demand, low availability. But what we saw was pretty much across the board, where the market demand for people to work, whether it was Gen Z, hospitality, software development, there was such a demand that job seekers realized that they had the upper hand. And for the first time, job seekers had a position of power. So did not surprise us that job seekers would go on multiple interviews, even accept offers and keep interviewing. Is it generational? I don't think so. I think for the first time, job seekers went, you know what? I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm going to look after me. And the other thing is the HR technology. When you think about, like, not so much so for agency recruiters, because I know myself, when I was an agency recruiter, developing long-term relationships with people is the secret sauce, right? It is as an agency recruiter, I could call someone that I spoke to 3 years ago. When I've got the rec for them, they'll return my call because I always, right? So, but in corporate, here you have this, as we talked about a minute ago, this junior HR person who really doesn't want to be in recruitment. They want to be in HR. And you have tasked them with reading 500 resumes to fill 5 or 6 jobs. And they never get back to anybody. They don't understand the importance of just simply the professional courtesy of responding to someone, right? So it's kind of a taste of our own medicine. And I think corporate recruitment kind of conditioned the job seeker market to expect this. And then we suffered the consequences when the tables turned in 2022, right? And so job seekers were like, well, the biggest phenomenon that we saw for sure, Canada, US, Europe, Asia Pacific, around the world, was job seekers accepting the job and not showing up. That was kind of it was shocking. Companies were reporting upwards of 50-60% of job seekers not showing up on the first day.
But Shelley, one of the things that you said there that I think has been a huge issue is when we talk about maybe 10 years, 15 years ago, there used to be 20 applicants for a job, 20 to 30. Now, on average, if a job is being picked up by any of the aggregators, you can be depending on the market, depending on the type of job, you can be getting 500 resumes. And a lot of companies do not take their tech seriously. Little things like rejecting all your candidates with a personalized message if you're getting that many. It's just literally you're just pressing a button, but most companies have not even set that up in their ATS, right?
I was just going to mention that we have software that will reject, in software functionality that will reject the candidates for us. And you can craft your own message and everything, but no one's using that button. You can even do it in LinkedIn. I use it in LinkedIn. I'll craft a message. Because again, I'm like Shelley. I still want to maintain relationships with people because I don't know when I want to go back to them again.
Yeah.
And if I just do a simple response to them, they always, almost 100% of the time will respond back to me and thank me for the response.
Thank you for saying no, or thank you for the update, right? Like it's so simple, but again, it's symptomatic of who have you tasked with reading those resumes. And I'm talking corporate recruitment now. I think that's fundamentally what has happened, is the value of having a true strategy for talent attraction, how we treat candidates, how we speak to candidates. Like the whole thing really does need a strategy. It should not be left up to someone who's got 3 months of experience. There needs to be a plan.
Yeah.
Well, if we think about the brand, not only the employment brand, but even the consumer or the B2B brand, it should be a crime for companies not to reject candidates properly. You think about it, all of those that are applying to your job are potential clients, if not already clients. Giving them a negative experience with your brand is, let's take the employment brand aside of it. It's just not the right thing to do. If I'm the vice president of marketing or even sales and I see that's happening in recruitment, I would just deliver a blow.
Yeah. Well, and plus it affects your company brand.
It does.
Oh, it does. And the reputation. And that's
100%.
and that's it. Well, plus too, I mean, how many times? And I don't know if people are using Glassdoor as much now as they were like even 5 years ago to check on the reputation of a company. Maybe they are. I just haven't heard about it recently. But I know there was a client that I was working for 5 years ago, and they had a really bad Glassdoor review, and it was turning people off. And so we had to go and actually have their employees add to Glassdoor to bring their Glassdoor rating up. So those employees that were happy there, right? So that they could improve their rating, because it was really affecting their ability to hire good candidates.
Do you know what has replaced Glassdoor? There's still some viability with Glassdoor, but I think when you look at the Millennials and Gen Z, they've leveraged TikTok and Instagram Reels to go and share their challenges with particular organizations, and they're not being shy about it as well. They're naming names, which is so shocking for us. Like, I'm Gen X, and I'm sure the boomers feel the same way. I'm like, that is shocking to go online, record a video, or record you getting laid off, or
I saw
record
those. I saw
and putting it out there, naming the brand just seems so career limiting. But they're not thinking about the same way that we did. Like, my parents were boomers, and they taught me, like, show up to work, whatever the boss says you do, you're always on time, you work extra hours, like, go above and make your company look good. All of these have kind of gone away, and, like, honestly, I don't blame them. So I'm not saying this is a generation, like, we have broken the trust. And when I say we, I'm talking about employers. We have broken the trust by doing mass layoffs all the time, almost on every couple of years for some companies. And think about, as the employee, of course, you're not going to have the same loyalty to any company as an employee or as a potential employee that's coming in. That's why they don't care as much about ghosting. As for us, that was just not even something we would consider.
Yeah, good points. I think between that, with the massive layoffs that we hear about now, we didn't hear about massive layoffs 30, 35 years.
They didn't happen.
No. And, you started hearing about acquisitions around, the year 2000, started hearing more about acquisitions, I think.
Yeah.
But people still, you didn't hear about the layoffs as much. People were shifting, there was a lot more movement. And so, like you talked about, Shelley, the business cycles that we've seen, right? So I think during that period of time, there was a very large business cycle in just movement and shifting of people. People weren't staying at jobs for, their entire career, with one company anymore. But I think it's interesting too that you bring up the fact that, with all these people now that are not feeling guilty about ghosting because of the layoffs and because of these big trends and because you've got, 500 applicants to one position. It has shifted the way people think about it. Don't feel guilty. I think, though, having candidates ghost is one thing. Okay, so who's the more guilty of the two? A candidate who ghosts or an employer who ghosts a candidate? Who's got the bigger risk and responsibility there?
I believe the biggest blame rests with applicant tracking system technology. And so when you look at, and I'm talking like any company that employs 1,000 or say 5,000 or more people, the technology was chosen by usually HR and not recruitment. And let's make a distinction, Denise, because if talent acquisition chose it, it would not have been built the way most of these big systems are built. And let me give you an example. So you go to apply for, say, an hourly job with a major warehousing organization, let's just say. And you go to apply, and this is an hourly job, low skill, no skill type of work, and it's hourly, and you have to fill in 6 screens. You can't do it on your phone. You have to fill in 6 screens of information, and then at the end, it tells you to upload your resume, and you have to spend anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes just to apply for the job. So along comes something called Amazon. So Amazon said, we're going to make your whole buying experience frictionless. I can see something on Amazon and have it shipped to me tomorrow. I don't care what goes on behind the scenes, but I'm now conditioned to expect response, speed. I get what I want, and everything is easy. Okay, so what an absolute day and night contrast with how to apply for a job. You mean to tell me that there's a technology that can do the same thing Amazon does with buying anything? We know the technology exists because we interact with it every single day. So why do companies make you fill in 7 screens and then upload your resume and it's all wrong? Like it's so outdated and old-fashioned. So as job seekers, we're and companies. So all of this long-winded explanation. Sorry, I'll come back to your point. And the question was, who's to blame? I believe HR is to blame. I believe HR made a decision to make their job easier but harder for the job seeker, and they failed to keep up with what was happening in the world around them, right? Because every job seeker knows it's possible, but companies have not invested. So HR gets no budget, or they get their budget slashed, or they're afraid of technology, or they're afraid of change. And I think job seekers are just simply, for the first time, having more control over how many jobs they apply to and whether or not they can accept your job and then find out that you're a crappy place to work too, right? And change their mind. So,
but yeah, everything's so transparent, like you're saying, Shelley. It's all so transparent now.
Yes. Well, not all of it is transparent, and I'm going to go through that. So, Shelley, I do want to counter your point because you were explaining the Amazon effect, and I actually blame the Amazon effect as one of the big challenges that we are coming across. So yes, you're 100% right. The ATS process, especially with the big players, right? Like we're talking about the big HRIS systems, like the Workdays of the world, success factors, their application process is a nightmare, right? And there's a lot of examples on the internet. There was a gentleman that was applying for, I think, 150 jobs, and he was just giving a ranking on like what was the experience as a job seeker. And the one thing that he called out is an example, Workday. He had to create 80 different profiles to apply for jobs on a Workday system. So 80 different Workday profiles. I'm like, what world do we live in, right? Like, why wouldn't that profile just carry over to anyone in Workday? But there are systems that do that. But to your point, so Indeed came in and was like, well, we got to fix this, right? Because the applicant tracking systems are just not doing a good job. And they leverage exactly the example of Amazon, removing all friction from the application process with a one-click hire, right? You click on it once, you have your profile. That is where the majority of Indeed applications are coming from. And if you look at worldwide, Indeed is by far the biggest job site in the world, driving most of the applicants. So that's been good. Like, credit to Indeed that they saw a problem and like, we're going to fix it. But I think in doing this, they created it that it's so easy to apply for now that literally a person can go in and apply to 200 jobs within hours with the one-click apply, and really not even know where they applied to or have any clue of the company. And then we're seeing AI tools come in play that are leveraging this to be able to apply to 1,200, 1,500 jobs in a day. Of course, they're not going to be qualified for these jobs. Like, they're just applying for any role. The other thing that's happened is career coaches have been telling people, no, apply for all the jobs, right? Like, apply, even if you're not qualified, apply for the job. And that has just created a massive amount of noise. So, and employers have not been able to figure it out. So at the end of the day, I'm not blaming Indeed. I'm not blaming the ATS. I am putting the blame on the employers, because the employers have done nothing to figure this out. They don't even know how Indeed works. They don't even know how their applicant tracking system works. And I'm generalizing, but it's a pretty big number that doesn't have a deep understanding. So the employer is not kept up with the times, and now they're getting a ton of candidates. They don't know what to do. They got junior recruiters coming in play. There is plenty of tech out there. There's plenty of people willing to do the job. So employers, it's your fault. I'm blaming you on ghosting. Yeah, and Denise, sorry, I'm going to go keep on this rant if you don't mind, because there's something else that I think has been a big driver. Recruitment marketing. So around 10 years ago, we're like, hey, we're not marketing our jobs correctly, right? Like we're just putting a boring job ad and we're going on the career site. We're just putting basically boring stuff, what the job should be. And we've come to play, be like, this is like a marketing document, right? Like how you advertise your job. Unfortunately, we took it too far. We basically tried to be B2B marketers and just basically work with aspirational language that is just complete BS compared to transparency, true behaviors within the organization. What are the harsh realities? Because we need to get people to opt out as well. We need people to realize that this is not a culture I want to work. I don't want to work all weekends, all nights. I don't want to like play hard, work hard. That's not the culture I'm looking for. But we are not telling them in the job ads. So people are just thinking, oh, it must be a great company to work for, and just apply to all the jobs. So again, the employers.
Yeah. And I think you made a good point too, on the positions where they have the easy apply or quick apply or whatever. And they're getting so many responses because it's going to be easier now for people to apply and not have to do the 20 to 45 minute, application fill like that Shelley was talking about. That's good. I mean, that's almost like boomeranging then on the employer side to receive too many responses and not have the opportunity. Now, what about though, because now you've got software layer on top of software. So now you have tools grading they're grading the applicants, right? The software is grading the applicants. So it doesn't even require a recruiter or a sourcer or coordinator to go in and look at the 500 resumes. Now the software is doing it for them and spitting out only those candidates that qualify based on what the software is seeing. Now, we talked about this in another podcast session. How many applicants do we know that can write a really good resume? There's that
Not
problem.
many.
I know. So you've got these applicants now who are applying because they think that they have a good resume, who are applying for these positions. So now you've got software rating their resume before it gets sent out to a recruiter, and they're rejecting these candidates who could potentially be good applicants, but they just don't know how to write a good resume.
There is literally thousands of vendors out there that are doing some type of matching, right? Some are way better and leverage real science and real data. The majority don't. They're snake oil. They're basically doing a plugin on ChatGPT, and there's so many challenges with this. I don't know if you've read the book, The Algorithm by Hilke Schellman, which she goes in real life examples of basically the algorithm or going offside, right? And making bad decisions. And I definitely recommend anyone to listening to check out that book, because honestly, put the fear of God in me. Put the fear of God in me that we are going down the road and we have no understanding what we're doing and what technology, and are we just creating bias at scale, right? Like, let's admit we all have a bias, and we're interviewing people. There is some people that will have a bias. Maybe it's unconscious. It happens. But what happens when an AI tool has the same bias, but now is doing it at scale? Like, there's only so much damage that Serge Boudreau can do compared to a software that's reaching millions of people. So yes, that is a very deep concern. I'm not against the candidate matching and scoring. I think there is some validity to it, but not all the vendors there is. And I don't think we know what we don't know. So the next 2 to 3 years are going to be absolutely critical. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot of pushback from job seekers being like, I didn't get hired because of an AI tool. like, what the hell? And they start digging in reality, there might have been a bias, right? Like, we don't know.
Yeah. Kind of like we saw with the Actors Guild, remember? And the writers, that felt like AI was going to take over their jobs.
Well, that's okay. I'm okay with AI taking your job if it's better than a human. But if it's not, that's where my concern is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shelley?
I was just going to add, Denise, Serge just touched on the fact that a lot of software vendors have just taken ChatGPT and plugged it in, and now they claim to have artificial intelligence on their system. The other thing, when you're looking at solutions, I would also say what percentage of job seekers are now going to ChatGPT, taking the job description and saying, write my resume to match this job description.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Hired Score is doing what? It's AI versus AI. Because the job seeker, no, really, it is.
That's
and
good.
It's not
Yeah,
far-fetched.
that's true.
I had a recruiter call me the other day and he goes, you're not going to believe this. He said he was doing a phone screen and he could hear the job seeker pause and typing and responding and just these generic responses. But he was typing into ChatGPT how to answer the interview questions. Listen, it is, I don't know what percentage, and I know there's the candidate experience survey that goes out. I'm hoping that this year they'll add, what are the instances of people using AI to answer interview questions, to do skill assessments for them, to do programmer coding assessments for them. But, this is a reality. Job seekers are getting pretty savvy. They know that they can use AI to help them as well.
It's very fair.
And that job seeker was a loser because in reality, he should have used voice to text,
yeah.
right? Like, which I'd seen is basically repeating that you just press the button, repeat the question, then it basically lays you out the answer right in front of you. There is so
typing it out, you mean? Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's true.
Oh,
True
my
story.
gosh.
So the likes of Hired Score or other layering tools, they're also only as good as the data that is being put in, right? Like if somebody uses ChatGPT to answer or to enhance their resume, that's not solving the problem either. That just makes things worse.
Well, and at what point during the interview process, after taking all this time for the recruitment staff and the hiring staff to set up interviews and whatnot, at what point do they find out this person is not legit?
What a waste of time, right?
What a waste of time.
Yeah, there's two things that can happen is you wasted that time or they actually get hired, which happens too. And the reality hits really quickly that they do not know what they're doing. And now you've got an employee that you have to lay off, all of this stuff. I think this is going to be one of the biggest challenges going into the next 5 years is exactly that. Like, how do we get to a point that we trust the candidate's qualifications? And that's a big challenge for a lot of HR tech vendors coming into the market, but it's a big challenge for talent acquisition departments. So Denise, question for you.
Sure.
How do we fix this? Let's start with just the candidate ghosting of interview, not showing up to interviews. What have you done? What's your thoughts here?
One thing I did read this weekend was the fact that, one of the reasons that people are ghosting so much is they're overcommitting themselves and on both sides, the employer side and the candidate side. Yeah. We're over applying for jobs. We have too many candidates who have applied. So the employers now, and Shelley, you brought up a good point. I also kind of blame the ATS technology as well, because that's really kind of the root of all evil in terms of too many applicants coming in. And then you don't have the staff to manage that influx of applicants, right? One of the solutions that came up in researching ghosting is the overcommitting. We're overcommitting ourselves. Is there a nice way to end a call or end a conversation with a candidate and say, hey, listen, this is what I've been doing lately. This is what the hiring manager is looking for. Like I'm looking for a position, a senior IT business solutions architect right now. And this hiring manager wants somebody with this particular PLM skill. So I'm letting the candidates know this hiring manager is adamant that this person has to have this particular PLM skill. You don't have that. But I do want to follow up with you if there's another opportunity that you fit. So I will stay in contact with you and let you know. But for right now, I need to keep my search up looking for somebody with this PL. So I'm kind of like doing a soft close with them and letting them know I'm not going to follow up with you on this because you're not a fit. Tell people the truth. Be honest with them. Don't give them a line of crap and tell them, oh, you know what, you might be a fit, but maybe not. I'll check back with you. Be honest. People don't mind you being honest. And like you said, Shelley, if you go back to them 3 years from now, if you were honest with them during that first conversation, they will pick up the phone again. But if you do this kind of like what they call soft ghosting kind of deal, is that funny that that's actually a term, soft ghosting? That you're going to just kind of push them to the back burner and never connect with them again? That's not okay. So we need to be honest with people. We need to be upfront with them.
I agree with everything you said there, Denise. I think there's a couple of things that might be a little bit different depending on what you recruit, right? Like if we look at talent acquisition, corporate talent acquisition, it's really hard for a recruiter to build a relationship with this many candidates at the same level, right? But let's look at where I think the biggest challenge is we're talking about hospitality, quick service restaurants, retail, where ghosting is, we're in the 40 to 50% of candidates not showing up to the interview, but also not showing up to work on their first day. And there is many techniques, tactical things, but they work, right? And here's a couple that I've leveraged that work really well for me. So when I had candidates that were coming into an interview with a hiring manager on location, one of the things that I would ask them, like, how are you getting there? Like, are you taking this route or this route? And the goal of that was to have them picture themselves actually getting in the car and figuring out which route. And that is half of the battle. And it shows that, hey, I'm committed. I'm going to send you the Google Map link with the direct from where you were at your address if I have it. If I don't, those are all things that made a massive difference. Texting, having a text in the morning, be like, hey, we're looking forward to meeting you today at 11. Jim, the hiring manager, is going to be waiting for you in front. Boom, rate just goes up dramatically because they feel like you're watching, right? Like not in a bad way, but they're actually engaged in this because I'm sure they've had experience where they show up at the counter, be like, hey, I'm in here for an interview with John. And the person working the counter is like, oh, John's not here. Like, and then they panic and that person has a bad experience, and that happens a lot. So there is tactical items that you can put in place for a high volume that will help dramatically. But the two ones that I use that worked is get them thinking of how they're going to get there. And secondly, text them that you're waiting for them and they're going to be there as much as you can without being a hindrance. But then the other thing is ghosting, not showing up to work, right? Like not showing up the first day. And I think this happens across like the jobs I'm just talking about, but I think it happens maybe a little bit higher up in the chain. But as you get into more professionals, that's got to be pretty rare, but I'm sure it happens occasionally in that sense. And where we really struggle, and it's a word that everyone should have in their vocabulary, is pre-boarding. Like, what are you doing in front? Like, are you setting them up properly? Are you in communication with them? Are you setting up expectations of what their first day is going to look like, what their first week is going to look like? And being very active with them until their first day, because we all know starting a new job creates a lot of anxiety, right? For everyone. Like, oh, like, who's going to be there when I get up? Like, what do I wear? All of these. If you do a good job of pre-boarding candidates, I guarantee you, unless something drastic happened, they will be there on the first day. So those are a couple of tactical things that you can do, in my opinion. But I'm curious, Shelley, I know you have a lot.
Actually, I was...
Well, but before she starts, some of those things that Shelley, you'll probably agree with me that he just discussed is what we used to do a long time ago.
Yeah.
Before all this came up. Anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
True.
I had my little list here, and I checked every single box that I was going to say. So Serge and I have been working together for a few years now. And that was, so it is the pre-boarding is so important. Is there any reason that people can't be filling out all these mundane forms? Because the other thing is people who start a job and yet they keep interviewing because they sent out so many applications. You may have offered them the job. They may have even showed up for the first day, but now they get other offers and they quit within the first 30 days, which in executive search or in the staffing agency world is just deadly. And so we're trained from day one on how to maintain contact with people, the pre-boarding and the onboarding, and ensuring that they are welcomed and they know where to go. These are all things, and we're asking candidates. I think that's a really important thing, is throughout the process, you're asking them, where else are you interviewing? How does this opportunity stack up against the other opportunities? And I think the rare exception, someone will actually be deceitful. I think for the most part, job seekers are honest. For the most part, especially when we're down to like the final stages and final interviews, if you honestly have other opportunities that are looking good, that they'll disclose it to you. And again, Denise, we built a relationship with them, right? Like you're not one of 50 people I'm hiring to do this same job, right? Like we're building a relationship. And if you trust me, and I'm here to help with the process, and I'm here to help onboard as well. The other thing, Serge, that you mentioned that I'd absolutely reinforce is texting. Don't send email, text them, right? Like sending somebody an email or phoning them, like it's just not done.
Yeah.
Just don't respond to, or using InMail, right? Like a text will get responses, something like in the 90 percentile or something, right, Serge? Last survey?
97% of texts are open. I do want to clarify one thing, though, for any recruiter listening. Don't do it from your phone, okay? Especially if you're a woman, highly not advised to do it from your own personal phone and your personal phone number. There is tons of really low-cost texting software out there that will give you a different number so you can do this. Like our friends of the show, RecText, do this really, really well. Never use your phone and your personal number to text candidates, because there are horror stories out there. Sorry, Shelley.
Thank you.
I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to.
No, good point.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
point.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for throwing that in there. That is absolutely, don't use your own number.
The other thing, and I'm curious how you feel about, like both of you, is one of the things that I hear a lot about candidates ghosting employers, either like throughout the process, even before their hire is showing up, is how the hiring manager treated them during the interviews. Like, we are very friendly people. Recruiters are trained. Like, we definitely want to create a relationship and get the best out of them and have some type of, not like friends, but like have a connection to them. Sometimes hiring managers have been thought to just, this is how you do it. You're hardcore in the interview. You show no personality, and you have the mindset that they are so lucky to be sitting in front of me, and me considering having them come work with us is like a huge honor. A lot of hiring managers have this mentality, and it comes through in the interview, and the candidates are very, very turned off by it as well. So that's one of the things when we talk about like ghosting is, are we training our hiring managers correctly? I think there's a lot of doubt that we are as well. Like, and the difference of being hard and asking real questions and being an asshole is they're different, right? Like, you can still be a hard questioner and a hard interview, but you don't need to be an asshole.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. I had a candidate last week, in fact, turned down a position because the manager had yelled at him.
Yeah.
I go, during the interview, he yelled at you? Really? Oh my God. So then I had to go back to the client, and go, what's going on here? Turns out it's a new VP who's got this, like, it's an honor to work here. You'll be blessed to work here, blah, blah, blah. So so now we got to change that up. And I can remember years ago when I worked for Motorola, there was a hiring manager named Ed, and he was as stiff as a board during the interviews, just very no personality and whatnot. And I went into his office after some interviews that they had, he and his team. And I wanted to talk to him about it. I walked in, there was this giant Buzz Lightyear poster, framed poster in his office. And I go, where's that, Ed? During these interviews. And he laughed. And I go, you need to bring your Buzz Lightyear personality to these interviews. And honestly, just that one suggestion changed the way he interviewed.
I've always said, Denise, we talk about setting expectations, but in how many organizations have the hiring leaders had even 1 hour of training on how to conduct an interview? We make these assumptions when, in fact, hiring leaders only know their own personal experience. And so, and I call it almost, I know I'm probably using this phrase inappropriately, but generational trauma. But it really, if you say as a new grad had to go through this grueling interview process and you had to answer these absurd questions that have nothing to do with your ability to perform this work. And so that's the only experience that you may have had. So as a hiring manager, they believe that they need to impart this same terrible experience on you. Because I had to go through it, so do you, right? Rather than companies investing in training their leaders on, or like you, hiring and having a great staffing partner who will come in and have an honest conversation with them, that you're coming across stiff as a board, right? Like if you care enough about your clients, you would have that honest conversation with them and tell the hiring manager, like, what's happening here? I've found that when I do that, many times the hiring leaders will tell me, well, that's how I was treated, or they will honestly admit to me they are so nervous. They are as nervous as the candidate because interviewing is not something they do on a daily basis. For recruiters, it's how we make a living, right? Like I've done thousands of interviews, 10,000 interviews easily. So of course, I love it. I love getting people to talk about what they did and tell me what you were thinking. Why did you make that decision? But it's not realistic to expect hiring managers to know that. We need to counsel and coach them as much as we do job seekers.
Versus just hiring people with absolutely no experience whatsoever and bringing them into corporate America. So the training, the training of the recruiters, training of the hiring teams. Again, it's how are you going to market yourself and brand yourself as a company, right? And I think I agree with both of you. I think the employer, it starts with the employer first to have that good experience for people. And then maybe that ghosting will stop on both ends or at least subsides because it is a problem. I mean,
yeah. Well,
solutions.
It goes to where this conversation started at the top of the podcast, right? It's hiring the right person. And what generally we've done in corporate America, but corporate anywhere in the world, is we've taken people from HR that want to follow the HR path. And the skill set is completely wrong. And again, I'm generalizing, but there's nothing that HR hates more than actually talking to people. It's the reason there is so many processes and systems that distance themselves from the actual employees. And it's the same for candidates. So we're putting people that do not want to be talking to candidates and giving them the expectation, hey, you're going to need to reach out, screen candidates, you're going to need to reject them, have honest conversations with them. No, they don't want to be doing it. Not saying agency recruiters want to do that, but
we're going to.
Exactly, we're more geared towards it. No one wants to call someone and say, hey, you're not going to get the job, right? Like, no one wants to do that. It's not fun, but it is our duty. It's why we get paid, right? Like, it's one of the things that agency recruiters understand. Maybe corporate recruiters or HR doesn't. Like, it is something they just don't want to do.
Okay, so but on that note, though, something you just said, though, sparked a thought. If you are working with recruiters, though, in Asia Pacific, for example, and I've seen this a lot in Japan and Singapore, Hong Kong, China, their HR people and their TA people are the same people. They don't have a distinction between TA and HR. The people they hire do the same job, and they're using agencies to do all of the sourcing and recruiting to bring those candidates in. But they don't have like a separate HR and TA function in a lot of the companies there that I've noticed. So,
well, what you said, it's like the agency side of it is very big in those countries, right? So basically, sure, the HR, TA, HR and talent acquisition are the same, but in reality, the work they're doing in talent acquisition is the admin role, right? It's like, do we have that person's paperwork? Here's the offer. They're doing that type of admin work. In our world, the biggest mistake, and this is, I'm still hoping for those days, but there needs to be a separation of HR. And when I'm saying separation of HR is there's a big portion of HR does the admin, right? And the admin needs to get done. We're talking about payroll. We're talking about employee information. We're talking all of these things. But there is a more strategic side of HR that has risen in the last 5 years, and talent acquisition has always been a part of it. If you ask CEOs what's the biggest concern in the organization, is talent attraction and talent acquisition, right? But then we've seen talent management, and now we're seeing learning and development with skills-based hiring, right? The change in how we look at skills and reskilling and upskilling has become critical. I guess I'm using this podcast as a platform to say it's time to separate, right? Let's use talent management, talent acquisition, and learning and development, and that is a different part of HR. The rest of the HR admin can stay the same. They can do what they like, but there's a reason HR has not gotten a seat at the table forever, is because we've never wanted it. Talent acquisition is this group. These three are so fundamental to success of organizations in the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's time to break free and create strategic HR, strategic talent management should be the focus, because we can't sit under HR any longer. They're holding back organizations by doing that, right? I know, Shelley, you feel the same, or maybe not. I know it's
so
Denise,
I see the same thing in North America, where organizations have like your HR business partner, and their role is to be very broad across all parts of employee experience. And equally so, I don't know about you, but I know in my personal experience, when I'm working with an HR business partner who treats me like a partner, the expert that I am, and treats me respectfully, I find that I'm looking for ways to exceed their expectations, right? Like if you're, unless you're retained search, but I think a lot of people that are contingent search engagements, who are you going to work harder for, right? You're going to work harder for the HR business partner who gives you all the information, allows you to speak to the hiring manager. They will facilitate if the hiring manager isn't getting back to you with feedback or a decision or giving you direction. That's a magical relationship. So I think in those cases where organizations haven't yet matured or aren't big enough to have a talent attraction strategic function, and like Serge pointed out, certainly in Asia Pacific, the use of staffing firms is significant. Parts of Europe as well. That is part of how they build their talent attraction, is both using in-house resources and outside sources, right? But I mean, there's nothing better for me than an HR business partner who says, Shelley, you're the expert. You take
Oh,
care
yeah.
of bringing in, finding the people, coordinate, getting everything in front of our hiring leaders. And they'll make sure your invoice gets paid right away.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there you go. Yay. Stick close. Well, I was going to say, though, I wonder if talking about the other regions, if they have the same issues with ghosting that we have here in North
do.
America,
They do.
Yeah.
They absolutely do.
even though they're working more with the agencies or
No,
agencies.
it's one of the questions that we asked to our international guests on the podcast because we're very curious about the same. We had a gentleman from the Netherlands a couple weeks ago. We asked, like, is ghosting a challenge in parts of Europe? And absolutely, especially in the Netherlands, which was the example. So we hear it across the world. I know the UK is the same. I know Australia. I listen to podcasts in the space in different countries, and we're all talking about exactly the same things. Like, there is almost no difference.
Wow. But I just think that I like what I read, though, this weekend. If we just made a couple of key changes, like what you were talking about, Serge, and then the transparency, being transparent with people, but separating, upskilling people, and being cautious about who we hire, training, but like you were saying, Shelley, too, training the hiring managers, having a more cohesive hiring plan across the entire company, right? They had this thing called Bounty Hunter, and they would set up these tables outside the cafeteria because that's back when everybody worked on site and actually ate lunch at the company cafeteria. Anyway, so they would have these tables set up and people would come and recommend friends for positions that were open. And if their friends got hired, they would get like $200 or $300, that type of thing, little bonuses. But it saved the company oodles of money. But they used to have these all hands meetings, and they would say at the all hands meetings, hey, don't forget about the bounty hunter tables are going to be set up outside the cafeteria. The whole company, we're all recruiters. Everybody that works for this company is a recruiter. So if we shift and push that mentality back to the companies and do more training and more leadership training on interviewing and incorporate everybody into it, I think that we will be treated more like business partners, number one, right? Internally and externally. And they'll have a different focus, and maybe it'll help with the ghosting.
Shelley said this on our last podcast, no is an answer. Getting back to your candor and just saying no, that's not ghosting, right? It's giving them the answer they're looking for. The other tip that I love about recruiters that do this, they leverage every Friday afternoon as a time that they reach out to their candidates and give them an update, either by email, text, phone, whatever the case is, even if there is no update. As recruiters, we should be doing this way more often.
Well, you guys, this has been an amazing podcast. I thank you so much. I mean, you guys are my new friends now. I really appreciate
Come visit us in
And I guess
Calgary.
No, let's go visit in Arizona. Let's not.
Can we get an invite?
It's minus 25.
Just
Shelley.
invite ourselves there.
Yeah, we'll show up.
Come on down. Come on down. I've got plenty of room here. I've got a big house. You guys can stay here.
Okay.
We'll be there.
All right.
Next week, we'll call you.
All right, you guys, have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Right.
you.
This was a lot of fun.
Au revoir.
All right,
Okay. Bye-bye.